Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Monday Majlis today. And it's my greatest joy to introduce you, Livnat, who will be the star of this Majlis. And
Okay.
I met her in this summer at a conference, and I was really impressed by her as a scholar and really liked her as a person. So I was delighted when she accepted our invitation to come to the Majlis. Now, this will be a special one because Livnat told me now that she would prefer me to ask her questions about instead of preparing a presentation, and this is fine. So I will try to be intelligentish.
There is a presentation of the academic side, but
yes, but let's start.
I'm not wasting anyone's time, you know.
So what would you prefer? Would you prefer to start with the academic thing and then have a discussion, or the other way around? The only yeah.
Whatever. You're the host. You
okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So Livnat, first of all, maybe I'll ask you, how did you get into the present research, and then we go back in time, maybe.
Yeah, okay. So my present research, what I'm going to present today is, you know, a study about the Qadiri creed, the al-iʿtiqād al-Qādirī, the creed that was that is attributed to the caliph al-Qādir bi-llāh, and it started. I wasn't planning to study this creed or anything. My you know, my speciality is Islamic theology, but during the Corona, first days of the Corona, Maribel Fierro, a friend and a great scholar, asked me whether I think that al-Qādir really authored the creed. So I replied immediately, sure, he did it because, you know, George Muḥtazilī said so. And, and that was it. And she said that she was editing a book with Sonia Brentjes and Tilman Zeidensticker about rulers as authors. And she asked me whether I'm willing to write a very small piece about al-Qādir and his creed. And I said, yeah, sure, it will be, you know, a piece of cake. And it turned out to be a project of more than a year. Of course, I was doing other things in parallel, but it took me a lot of time and a lot of digging in the sources to finally put something together, which I'm going to present to you today. So.
Yeah, I think that's fairly typical that we get a request and we accept it, and then we regret, and then eventually we are happy that we accept. When it is out, probably we are happy. And then there are moments in while doing it when we are also happy with it. But yes, this is a fairly common way to get into a specific research. How did you get into Islamic theology at all at the beginning?
Yeah, well, first of all, my training is in Arabic philology. I studied at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem with, you know, all the big names, big professors, really big names in the field. And I wasn't thinking, when I graduated, I wasn't thinking about an academic career at all. I was thinking about, you know, doing other things. And I did other things for 13 years. And when I was 33 years old, I finally decided that I'm going to write a PhD dissertation. I was doing other stuff, as I'm now emphasizing. And I wasn't really thinking about an academic career, but my dissertation was about Islamic theology. It was about Shifa al-Alil, a book on predetermination and free will, authored by Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. And I simply fell in love with Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. And so I pursued my academic career. And luckily for me, the fact that I started late didn't affect my progress. And now I'm an associate professor, and I'm really happy with my work. And that's it. That's my message to all of you who start the PhD course and not immediately after the BA or the MA, and wonder whether there is a chance. Well, there is a chance, of course, and if you are determined enough and good enough, then there is a chance.
Well, I can see already Yasmin with the thumb up, and we have Elias in the room, who is. I'm always embarrassed to say he's my student or our student, and he had a whole career as a medical doctor, and he's still a practicing medical doctor, and he started fairly recently his PhD. So and we had Rob Fuller. Many of you may know him, who also had actually 2 careers before engaging into a PhD, and he has been recently awarded a PhD. So yeah, and he wants to continue in academia. Now, it's very interesting for me. You said that even when you started the PhD, you didn't. It was not yet, I want to be an academic. Did I understand correctly?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was the plan then at that point? Why did you start the PhD, and what? Yes, so.
Well, I'm a bit embarrassed to tell this, and this is why I didn't want you to record, but anyhow, I'm going to be, since you are such a nice host, I'm going to reveal the truth. The truth is that I was really envious of my husband, who was doing his PhD in physics. So I saw how he enjoyed himself. I said, no way he's going to enjoy himself so tremendously, and I'm not going to. I'm going to work, a slave myself, So yes, I always liked reading since I was really little, and I read in several languages, and Arabic was my passion since I was like 12 years old, even before. So
Well, that's yeah. Well, you put it in a way to blaming yourself or blaming terms such as envy, but it's very interesting because it shows that the example of someone who has the freedom to do research can make us aware of this desire, and that this desire is legitimate, and we have the right to do such things. It's funny, I'm always telling my daughters and our students, everyone, the original meaning of the word school. Does anyone happen to know what school actually means in Greek?
It's like a whip or something, like
well, that's possible. I don't.
Yeah, it's
well,
like
it looks like today, certainly looks like today.
Yeah.
But I think it comes from the word skole. I don't know Greek, so it's yeah. Forgive me for my pronunciation, and possibly I'm altogether wrong. But and skole, as far as I know, means free time. Because this was a leisure activity. Well, people going to school means people just studying things instead of working on the fields or doing well, working. And so it means leisure, and it can at some stages of our life, we realize that it is indeed leisure, and it's indeed joy, and it's indeed a privilege for which we have to work a lot, as you did.
Yes.
So basically, you engaged into the PhD for the pleasure of it.
Yes, and it was about Islamic theology, as I said.
Yeah.
But when I finished the PhD and started teaching and starting, trying to find my path in research, I realized that I'm more inclined towards the hadith. And for the last, I think, 10 years, I'm always reading the hadith, and my book, Anthropomorphism in Islam, is basically on hadith, and basically on ahadith as-sifat. It's the hadith material that describes God in an anthropomorphic language. And so hadith is really my passion, and it took me a lot of years to come to this realization, because there is this phrase, comfort zone. Once you finish your PhD and you do things in the same path that you were in, that's really comfortable. I could have pursued Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, but frankly, when you read Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, you realize that without a firm knowledge in hadith, there is nothing to do there. They were scholars of hadith, basically. So that's what led me to my current research, which is hadith. And my current project is gestures in the hadith literatures, gestures, mannerism, body language as depicted in the hadith. And that's a fascinating topic, and I believe that I'm going to do it until retirement, and even after. Yes.
Well, then I really understand why Yasmin is so familiar with your work, and then I'm not even sure what to ask, because there are so many interesting things here. So okay, let's talk. Could you please tell a bit about this research of yours, which won't be the talk today, but this sounds also fascinating. This gestures
about
in
gestures. Oh yeah. Well, in a nutshell, when I read the hadith, when you read the hadith, everyone who reads the hadith is really fascinated by the description of the prophet. That is my, that's what I was thinking about when I was reading hadith, the description of the prophet. And then I realized that the description includes his body language and the gestures that he makes when he says things, that he wants to emphasize things. And I had what you call in English the eureka moment. I said, wow, that's like a Nobel Prize. I'm the first one who noticed it, because there was I couldn't find any research about it. But so I started digging, and then I saw that Ignaz Goldziher in 1896 published the first article on gestures in the hadith, and actually it was gestures among the Arabs. Über Gebärden und Zeichensprache bei den Arabern. That's the article. And then I saw that Goldziher, who was really a genius, and we all owe him, our occupation. He wrote about gestures throughout his oeuvre. You see gestures everywhere once you realize it. And luckily for me, I was almost among the very few who realized it. And now that's my research. So now I have a really huge article that I'm completing with a postdoctoral fellow of mine, Miriam Ovadia. Probably some of you know her. She wrote a fascinating book about Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. And this article is about Ignaz Goldziher as the father of gesture studies in Islamic and Arabic studies. Yeah. So.
Well, I think we can be all proud Ignaz Goltzi here just because he was a human being like us, but I cannot hide some national pride in that, because he is of course my compatriot, and this very old tradition of Hungarian Oriental studies, which have
last year was the 100 year of his passing away. He died in 1921. So yeah.
And I remember Rob, I think Rob is here. We had a discussion with Rob about him, and I think both of us were right, and it shows how great a scholar he was. That Rob said that he is great because of the actual data, what he collected, and so because that's still useful, and so his scholarship. And it's interesting because for me he was always great because of his innovative spirit and mind, how he approached things, and I think that's also still valid and interesting. So I didn't know about this field. But he was fantastic, for instance, in showing that holy places remain holy places across civilization, and so the continuity of such things. Livnat, why did you fall in love with Ibn Qayyim? What did your husband say about it?
Yeah, I always say that Ibn al-Qayyim is the second man in my life. That's true. Probably Ignaz Goltzi is the third. But why? Because, I think that when you look at Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya, and I think it's not just Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya, I think it's also Shamsuddin al-Dhahabi and Khalil bin Aybak al-Safadi, all the people who wrote in the Mamluk period. The works they produced are so rich, so interesting, so full of, everything, so encyclopedic. It was actually, his work was the first work on theology that I read in my life. So it was really easy, just to cling to Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya. But once you start with him, you realize that you cannot understand him without reading Ibn Taymiyyah. And once you start with Ibn Taymiyyah, you understand that you have to read Shamsuddin al-Dhahabi, and that you have to read Abu Ya'la, and you go back in time to all the great Hanabila, Ibn al-Jawzi, Abu Ya'la, Ibn Qudama. And as I said, you realize finally, you come to the realization that without having a very firm knowledge in hadith, you understand you don't understand not Ibn Taymiyyah and not Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya. So it's a journey, and I'm sure that when I'll be like 80 or 100 years old, I don't know, I will have the certain knowledge that I know nothing about what these people learned and wrote about. Because as much as you read, you realize that you know absolutely nothing. It's not, and it's an optimistic way of looking at things, not pessimistic, because there is no way to grasp everything. The same goes for great scholars of the Jewish heritage, like Maimonides, like Rav Saadia Gaon. These people were really something else. Ignaz Goltzi.
Yes, well, I couldn't agree more. Actually, that's one of the main things what we discuss in class, that we indeed don't know anything, and if we think we know something, we are definitely wrong. So and of course this was already pointed out by Socrates. So I wanted to ask you on this, on a practical, and I actually find this immensely liberating, the admitting that we don't know anything. because that's a source of being tolerant to ourselves and of course to others as well at all level. Problems really start when people start to claim that they have absolute truth. Now, how do you feel about your own scholarship? Can you, when going backwards in time and going deeper and deeper in the sources of our sources, has this danger that, okay, well, as actually I'm just following your thought, saying that you understood that before, that you cannot understand Ibn Qayyim without knowing all these authors and the Hadith. Now you are going back. How do you feel about what you published when you were not a scholar of Hadith yet?
Well, first of all, I'm always pleased with what I do, because I know I do it wholeheartedly. My work, I'm very passionate about my work, and I'm also forgiving to myself, because as you say, you cannot do it 100%, because you always learn about new stuff. I just give you an example about my book, Anthropomorphism in Islam. It was published in 2018. That's 5 years ago. And what I do ever since, including this project about gestures, because I also had 2 chapters about gestures in that book, is what I do is perfecting my my assumptions and rechecking the sources and writing more and more things that really rely about this book. So the book is not the final word, and nothing is the final word. There is always more. And also this, what I'm going to present to you, I believe in a few minutes, I completed the article like, I don't know, a year ago. The book is now in production. So, and today when I went over the things that I'm going to say, I said, oh boy, there is a lot to do more. So yes, it's you cannot be entirely satisfied. You always want to do more. You have the realization that you can. First of all, for me, I cannot say I'm 100% sure. I'm never 100. The best I can do is 99% sure. Yeah.
Well, I am actually 100% sure that I'm wrong. So that I don't know things, and this is I think this is a good start. And thank you again for your reply. Actually, somehow my question, I was hoping for something like this, because it can be really, and I think for all of us it may be this will to do the best possible. It can hinder us, and it would be a sad thing if we say the last word on something, and we are completely satisfied with it, and we say that, okay, I cannot do anything better, because then it would be like Diego Maradona when he finished playing football and trying to do other things and never achieving what he was before. So yeah, thank you. Yes, I still want to ask you now, why did you said Arabic was your passion? How did it become your passion? And indeed, what is your background? How did you get into knowing Arabic and such things?
Is it the last question?
I think it is, because because you have also a presentation to give.
Okay. Well,
sorry, I will just switch on the light because I can see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, oh boy, what a question. So, Istvan, I was thinking, well, how it become my passion? I don't know. Arabic was always present in the surroundings. There was, every Friday at 5 o'clock, there was this Egyptian movie. And I was like glued to the screen. And yes, Arabic was always there. Always wanted to know Arabic, and nobody in my family has any background in Arabic. And it was really something that nobody understood when it came from, but it did. And yeah, and luckily for me, I had great teachers, always, even today. And yeah.
So as it happens, it wasn't the last question. So where did you grow up? Oops. Okay, we have an unexpected visitor talking about growing up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I started with with Arabic when I was the age of this cute one. I grew up in Israel, a family of immigrants from Bulgaria. As I said, nobody knew Arabic. Bulgarian is really my mother's tongue, and you have to delete it from the recording when I say that. And that's it. And in Israel, when I was a little girl, I don't know if today it's the situation. It is the situation. I don't have any clue about it. But we started Arabic at 4th grade. So I had a lot of experience in Arabic when I came to the university.
Yeah, but you are one of the few who actually continued.
Yeah.
Actually, one more question. What was you wanted to do before, and you did before academia? Because I think that can be also an interesting.
I did all kinds of things. Mainly, I was a translator from Arabic to Hebrew and from Hebrew to Arabic. And I was also a teacher of Arabic. Yeah.
Okay, so Arabic was always there.
Yeah, always. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Normally, so in the template I send out to our guests, I say that this is kind of the after talk dinner discussion at the dinner table, what we decided to bring in front of before the actual talk. And this is because honestly I find these talks very often at least as interesting than the actual talk itself, because talks go to something specialized, which is fascinating in them. But these are things what we share, especially us in the field. We share a lot, and it's also interesting how well, that's one of the, I think, the main messages of this Majlis is that how varied is our field, how interesting is our field, how many things are to discover there on the one hand, and also that how many different ways and approaches are possible, and how many possible backgrounds and institutions where to study. So all this variety, because we especially I think at university, people may think that there is one way to do this and one channel, and it's much more a kaleidoscope than a whole universe, than one beam of light. Well, thank you very much, Livnat. We will have another set of questions by everyone who is here after the talk, which won't be recorded. So thank you. We can start. Now I will silence myself, and
okay,
and you can start it.
So I have
Great.
this presentation, and the topic is the Qadiri Creed, and well, I'll start by this. The topic of my present talk is the Qadiri Creed, al-iʿtiqād al-Qādirī, al-aqīdah al-Qadiriyya, also known as al-risālah al-Qadiriyya, which is regarded in modern scholarship as one of the famous emblems of Sunni Islam or Islamic traditionalism. The Qadiri Creed, which is attributed to Abbasid caliph al-Qādir bi-llāh, came to the attention of Western scholars only in the beginning of the 20th century, when the Swiss scholar Adam Mez discovered the creed in the manuscript of Ibn al-Jawzí's monumental chronicles al-Muntaẓam fi ta'rīkh al-mulūk wa-l-umam. Metz identified the creed's anti-Muʿtazilī tone, translated the creed, except its closing paragraph, into German, and provided a brief description of the text. This partial translation and its sketchy analysis appear in Metz's history of the Abbasid Caliphate entitled Die Renaissance des Islams, a work which was published posthumously in 1922 and translated into English in 1937. An Arabic translation of Metz's book was prepared by Muhammad Abdul Hadi Abu Raida in 1940. The book was published under the title Al-Hadara al-Islamiyya fi al-Qarn al-Rabi al-Hijri أو عصر النهضة في الإسلام. The translator cited the Qadiri Creed from Ibn al-Jawzí's Muntaẓam. The discovery of the creed by Metz passed almost unnoticed. Nonetheless, Louis Massignon mentioned the creed in his monumental 1922 work on the Sufi mystic al-Hallaj. And 36 years later, in 1958, Henri Laouste noted the resemblance between the Qadiri Creed and the Ibana, a creed authored by the Hanbali theologian Ibn Battah. Other than these two brief references, the Qadiri Creed remained terra incognita for Western scholarship until 1963, when George Maqdisi shed light on its role in the political arena of 11th century Baghdad. Maqdisi, who coined the term the Sunni revival to denote the campaign of reawakening Islamic traditionalism in the Abbasid Caliphate, marked the issuance of the Qadiri Creed and the public readings of the creed in the Caliphal court as the onset of this revival. Maqdisi identified the anti-Ash'ari slant of the creed and provided a thorough analysis of the text in both his 1963 and 1997 monographs on the Hanbali polymath Ibn Aqil. After Maqdisi drew the attention of Western scholarship to the centrality of the creed in Abbasid politics, the creed was referenced in modern histories of 11th century Baghdad in the list that you see here. And all these publications have taken the text that Metz discovered in Ibn al-Jawzí's al-Muntaẓam at face value and regarded it as the creed that the caliph al-Qādir authored. In other words, these publications assumed that A, the text quoted by Ibn al-Jawzī was the Qadiri Creed, and B, that al-Qādir indeed authored the text. We see these two assumptions in Frank Griffel's 2006 entry on the Islamic revival. Griffel provides a faithful summary of the modern research on the Qadiri Creed, and accordingly he determines that A, al-Qādir published the creed in 408, that's 1018. 2, the Qadiri Creed was inspired by Hanbali Sunnism. 3, the Qadiri Creed reflected the alliance that al-Qādir and his son al-Qaim formed with the Hanbalis. And 4, Griffel's description of the creed heavily relied on George Maqdisi's assumption that text that Ibn al-Jawzī quotes is a reduction or a summary of the Qadiri Creed. The above-mentioned description of the creed is inaccurate. First, the Qadiri Creed was not one text, but a series of texts. Second, while composing his creed, the Caliph al-Qādir relied on a book entitled Kitab al-Sunnah, which was penned by a marginal Shafi'i scholar by the name of Abu Ahmad al-Karaji. Third, as opposed to Maqdisi's assumption, which was rooted in modern scholarship, the text found in Ibn al-Jawzi's Muntaẓam is not the Qadiri creed. As I will show in the talk today, although the text found in the Muntaẓam stems from the Qadiri creed, it is not the creed. I will refer to this abbreviated text, which is not the original creed, as the IQQ. That's the initials of al-iʿtiqād, al-Qādirī, wa-l-qādirī. Furthermore, and as opposed to what Maqdisi said, this text cannot be regarded as anti-Ash'ari or pro-Hanbali. My aim in this talk is to examine the IQQ, which is erroneously dubbed the Qadiri Creed, and clarify the type or nature of traditionalism that this text reflects. The present talk comprises 4 parts. In the first part, I will briefly survey the history of the Qadiri Creed. In the second part, I will focus on the circumstances that led to the issuance of the IQQ. In the third part of this talk, we will read a paragraph from the IQQ, and the fourth part of the talk, if I have time, will consider the traditionalism of the IQQ based on what I call the Damascene narrative. I will clarify this term when we get to the fourth part of the lecture. But first, let us begin with the history of the Qadiri Creed, namely the texts that did not survive. The Creed is a series of documents and books issued by the Abbasid caliph al-Qadr bi-llāh in the years 408 and 409. The caliph issued 2 documents. At least one of these documents was a voluminous book. In the year 420, the caliph issued 3 books. None of these documents and books, henceforth the Qadiri Creed, have survived. There is scanty information in the sources about the content of these documents. We see it in Sharh Usul I'tiqād Ahl Sunnah wal-Jamā'ah by the traditionalist scholar Abu al-Qasim al-Lalakai from Baghdad. And in his report, we see that the first document of the Creed prohibited both teaching and conducting public debates on Mu'tazilism, Shi'ism, and al-maqalat al-mukhalifa lil-Islam, other dogmas that contradicted Islam. The second document issued in 409 was a book arranged according to the doctrines of the Sunnah, Kitab bi-madhahib al-Sunnah. And the 3 books that were issued in 420 were elaborate literary works. Apart from a severe attack on Mu'tazilism and Shi'ism, these books comprise the homiletic exhortation or admonition, wa'd, and a reference to the moral duty of every Muslim to command right and forbid wrong. Also, the books had an entertaining part, but I will skip about this part because it's not relevant to our discussion. I would like to say, however, that Ibn al-Jawzī provides detailed accounts on the public events in which the creed, the text that did not survive, was read. Apparently, the texts or parts of them were dictated to local preachers with the explicit intent that they would be read aloud in the mosques. From Ibn al-Jawzī's report on the events that occurred in the Hijri year 433, that's 1041 or 42, we learn that al-Qadir's son and successor, the caliph al-Qā'im bi-llāh, instructed his courtiers to prepare a copy of the Qadiri Creed. That's 14 years after his father died. This version was entitled al-iʿtiqād, al-Qādirī, wa-l-qādirī. The available primary sources did not identify the scholar who authored this abbreviated version of the creed. According to the description of Ibn al-Jawzī, al-Qā'im bi-llāh أخرج الاعتقاد القادري الذي ذكره القادر. Maqdisi and the researchers who followed him understood this text thus, that the Qadiri Creed was removed from its container and was publicly read in al-Qā'im's palace. However, there is another way to read this sentence. I suggest that we look at the verb akhraja, which means to copy, to quote, to rewrite. and the noun iʿtiqād, which means faith or belief, an abstract noun, not the text itself. So the mentioning of the ikhraj of the Qadiri creed leads us to raise another option, that al-Qa'im rewrote his father's profession of faith. This act of rewriting could be copying or quoting from an existing text or writing a new text in the spirit of al-Qadir's text. Namely, al-Qa'im did not copy from an existing text. What is indeed apparent is that during the reign of al-Qa'im, the Qadiri creed maintained its status as an icon of traditionalism. The concise format of this creed, the IQQ, was publicly reaffirmed on at least 2 occasions. In 432, al-Qa'im summoned the prominent religious scholars and the notables of Baghdad to his palace to sign the document as a symbol of their allegiance to, quote, the correct faith of the Muslims, iʿtiqād al-Muslimīn. An extant version of the IQQ, the text of 770 words, is found in Ibn al-Jawzī's Muntaẓam. This is the text that I sent you a link to. So what Adam Mez discovered was not the Qadiri creed by the IQQ. This concise text, which cites the various elements of the Sunni credo and denounces the Muʿtazilī and Shiʿi doctrines, reflects the caliph's commitment to Sunnism. But as opposed to the original creed, the IQQ was meant to reconcile between the different wings of Sunnism. I will get to this point shortly. First, about the text that we find in al-Muntaẓam. Ibn al-Jawzī, a prolific historian and theologian who affiliated himself to the Hanbali school of law, received the IQQ from his teacher, Muhammad ibn Nasir al-Salami. As-Salami, a professional memorizer of the Quran, received the text from Ibn Abi Ya'la, the author of Tabaqat al-Hanabila. So this is a biographical dictionary of Hanbali scholars, as I'm sure all of you know. Ibn Abi Ya'la's father, the renowned Hanbali theologian Abu Ya'la ibn al-Farā, was directly associated with the IQQ, or the composing of the IQQ. In the elaborate biographical entry that Ibn Abi Ya'la wrote about his father, Ibn Abi Ya'la recounts that his father Abu Ya'la and a group of traditionalist scholars from various schools of law were summoned to the caliph palace in 432. They were summoned in order to attend a ceremony that was held under the auspices of the caliph al-Qā'im bi-Amrillah. The ceremony occurred 13 or 14 years after the issuance of the 3 books which were attributed to al-Qādir. These scholars signed the IQQ and thus declared that they all shared one belief and acted according to the same doctrinal principles. We cannot determine whether Abu Ya'la obtained a copy of the document that he signed because the sources do not address this question. Based on all the information we possess, we presume that Abu Ya'la or someone else summarized the document from memory in his notes after the ceremony. The events that preceded the ceremony in al-Qa'im's palace are directly connected to the content of the IQQ. In 429, that's 3 years before the event, or before the ceremony in al-Qa'im's court, Abu Ya'la, a former rationalist who repented and became an ultra-traditionalist, published his controversial compilation of hadith that described God in an anthropomorphic language, the hadith or hadith al-Sifat. Abu Ya'la's compilation إبطال التأويلات في لأخبار الصفات, invalidating the metaphorical interpretation of the anthropomorphic hadith, was written to attack the Mu'tazilis and Ash'aris who interpreted these problematic texts metaphorically. That's ta'wil. Abu Ya'la had good intentions. He wanted to support the Hanbali dogma that no anthropomorphic expression in the scriptures should be interpreted and that the sacred texts should be accepted at face value without questioning their content, bi-llāh kayfa. However, in his enthusiasm to cite every hadith that was relevant to the subject, Abu Ya'la included in his book hair-raising anthropomorphic descriptions, such as the description of God laughing until his uvula is seen. That's for you, Yasmin, if you will hear me now. The problem with this material was mainly that it was attributed to dubious hadith authorities. The inclusion of such material of dubious sources gave the impression that Abu Ya'la supported a literal reading of the anthropomorphic texts, and that he was in fact an anthropomorphist, mushabbi, and a corporalist, mujassim. Abu Ya'la's book was a cause of embarrassment to his fellow Hanbalis as it fell to the hands of their rivals, the Asharis, like a ripe plum. His book proved exactly what the rivals of the Hanbalis claimed, that the Hanbalis were anthropomorphists. One of the young leaders of the Hanbali community thought that the rigid acceptance of the anthropomorphic hadith that characterized the ultra-traditionalism of Abu Ya'la and his followers harmed the Hanbalis. In fact, this leader was quoted as saying, I read it first in Arabic, لَقَدْ خَرِّئَ أَبُو يَعْلَى الْفَرَاءَ عَلَى الْحَنَابِلَةِ خِرْيَةً لَيَغْسِلُهَا الْمَاء. Abu Ya'la defecated on us Hanbalis to such a degree that water will never wash his excrement away. Forgive my language, but it's not my language. It's, it's in Ibn al-Athir's al-Kamil fi ta'rīkh. The Caliph al-Qaim decided to intervene and restore order in the Sunni community, and he intended to intervene before the intellectual discussion about Abu Ya'la's book spread among the lay people and deteriorated into riots. So the Caliph organized a ceremony which was not, as previous scholarship claimed, an expression of his open support in Hanbalism. Rather, the ceremony was intended to give Abu Ya'la a chance to atone for his so-called sins, namely for writing his book. The historical sources are silent about this point. However, this assumption, which was never raised by previous research, is clarified when we examine the first paragraph of the IQQ. And so here is the first paragraph of the IQQ. And this paragraph, the text, the IQQ is like 2.5 pages in the printed edition of al-Muntaẓam. One page is the first clause, and it directly addresses the question of the divine attributes and God's and the description of God. At first glance, it offers a standard traditionalistic narrative of God's essence and attributes, which corresponds with other traditionalist creeds. However, the wording of this clause does not correspond with the typical traditionalistic terminology. The author of this text uses calamic terminology when he describes God as omniscient by his eternal knowledge, which is unattainable. Alim bi'ilm azali ghayr mustafad. And there are other descriptions here that I'm not going to dwell on. If you want, we can talk about it during the discussion. Anyhow, this text is, let's say, it's a traditionalistic text, but you have calamic terminology, which is quite interesting. Elsewhere in clause 1, the IQQ addressed the topic of the divine attributes and provided the following declaration, which corresponded with the Ash'ari stance. God should be described only by the attributes that he used to describe himself. La yusaf illa bima wasafa bihi nafsahu. Or the attributes that his prophet used to describe him. And this should be known. Every attribute by which he described himself or which his prophet described him is used in the actual and proper meaning of the attribute and not in the figurative meaning. صفة حقيقية لا مجازية. The stance that the divine attributes are real existence or things was shared among all the traditionalists, Hanbalis and Ash'aris alike. While Hanbalis or ultra-traditionalists in general eschew the sophisticated calamic wording, the Ash'aris use this wording to express their fundamental acceptance of the divine attributes. The above quoted sentence, therefore, expresses a traditionalistic idea while using the vocabulary of the kalam. This Hanbali and Ash'ari acceptance of the divine attributes defied the Mu'tazili position of negating the distinct existence of God's attributes. So in summary, the caliph made Abu Ya'la sign a hybrid document which both supported a figurative reading of a hadith al-sifat and negated it. So we say it from the term صفة حقيقية ولا مجازية. This twofold approach is identical to the Ash'ari reading of these texts. By adding his signature to the IQQ, Abu Ya'la paid the price for the ijma' that the caliph demanded for all the trends of Sunnism in Baghdad. He apparently retracted from the blunt anthropomorphic stance that was attributed to him and withdrew to the warm embrace of the traditionalistic consensus. At this stage of his career, Abu Ya'la was against ta'wil, but he was compelled to sign the document which forthrightly applied ta'wil and used the Ash'ari vocabulary. So how Sunni was the Qadiri creed? Apparently not Sunni enough. The original Qadiri creed was ultra-traditionalistic. The IQQ, as I showed, was not. The IQQ reaffirmed the status quo in which the Sunni Islam is represented by both the Hanbalis and the Ash'aris. The Ash'aris did not give the document much credence. However, the Hanbalis of Baghdad, the most vociferous adherent of Islamic traditionalism, regarded the symbolic event in al-Qaim's palace as an official verification of their dominance in the public sphere. In 460, and as part of their vigorous campaign against the Ash'aris, the Hanbalis pressured the caliph to publicly reaffirm the creed. At this time, the caliph gave a copy of the creed to the leader of the Hanbalis, the Sharif Abu Ja'far. The Sharif arranged public readings of the creed in the Great Mosque near Basra Gate in Baghdad to demonstrate the caliph's unshakable support of Hanbalism. There are also two other stations or let's say landmarks in the path of the creed, but of the IQQ, but let's keep it for now and we can save it for the discussion afterwards. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the Damascene narrative. The creed lost its status as an icon of traditionalism. It was actually forgotten. It is absent from almost completely absent from the theological writings of the later traditionalist scholars. And this absence clearly indicates that the creed no longer occupied a place in the traditionalistic thought. Unlike other creeds, the IQQ was neither glossed nor discussed in later theological treatises, and its impact on the traditionalist thought is almost untraceable. So why did the creed lose its status as an icon of traditionalism? Why did it fail to become part of the Sunni curriculum? A cryptic footnote in the 1982 revised edition in English of Louis Massignon's magnum opus on al-Hallaj eventually led me to hitherto neglected pieces of evidence in the writings of Shams ad-Din al-Dhahabi and Ibn Taymiyyah, and also I found something additional in the writings of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. Based on these writings, I reconstructed the following narrative, which I call the Damascene narrative. To my dismay, the source from which the three Damascene scholars, that's al-Dhahabi, Ibn Taymiyyah, and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, drew the following narrative is untraceable. This source remains a missing link in the mystery of the authorship of the Qadiri creed. So what is the narrative, the Damascene narrative? In the background of the Damascene narrative, we see Abu Hamid al-Isfaraini, the head of the Shafi'i school in Baghdad, an influential scholar who was like the tutor or the mentor of al-Qādir. We go back to al-Qādir. Al-Isfaraini was very well-read in Kalam literature, but he didn't appreciate the occupation in Kalam, and of course munadharat, debates, that was something that he really despised. As one of al-Qadir's spiritual advisor, he was involved in al-Qadir's efforts to restore the caliphal authority. He could not have been involved in the writing of the original creed, of the books that comprise the Qadiri creed, because he died 2 years before the issuance of al-Qadir's first book. So according to al-Dhahabi, and this is the Damascene narrative, towards the end of al-Isfaraini's year, the caliph wrote a creed which was originally composed by Abu Ahmad al-Karaji, a scholar who died in 360, that's the 10th century. Al-Dhahabi merely indicates that the caliph made people unite around his creed. This sentence obviously refers to the public gatherings in which the scholars of Baghdad were required to sign the creed. Al-Dhahabi further refers to clause 1 of the IQQ, which he sees as the Qadiri creed, and he thinks that this text was authored by al-Karaji. So when he discusses this clause, the clause that I showed you before, Al-Dhahabi says that this clause was tainted by Kalamic terminology, which the caliph drew directly from al-Karaji's book. Al-Dhahabi especially points on the phrase صفة حقيقية لا مجازية, the actual and proper meaning of the attribute and not its figurative meaning as a Kalamic phrase. Al-Dhahabi was an ultra-traditionalist. He did not approve of Kalam and believed that every traditionalist scholar should have recourse to the Quran and the Hadith. He resented the use of Kalamic terminology and rejected the idea that metaphysical topics such as the divine attributes could be discussed at all. In fact, Al-Dhahabi accused al-Karaji of spreading ideas which made no sense and had the potential of damaging the souls of the believers. By mentioning al-Isfaraini's absence from the caliphal court at the time that the caliph received al-Karaji's book, Al-Dhahabi implicitly criticized the caliph's associates. Obviously, a scholar of al-Isfaraini's caliber would have attempted to prevent the infiltration of such dangerous ideas as the essence of the divine attributes into the caliphal court. However, al-Isfaraini's successors in the caliphal court were unaware of the malicious content of al-Karaji's book. That's Dhahabi's interpretation of the event. Summing up his severe judgment of al-Karaji and his book, Dhahabi concluded it would have been better that al-Karaji kept quiet and did not refer to the actual and proper meaning of the attributes, صفة حقيقية. Our way is to confirm the Creator's attributes and transmit the text exactly as we receive them. Now I come to the conclusion. So in this talk, I emphasized the need to differentiate between the Qadiri creed, namely the books and documents that al-Qadir wrote, and the Qadiri Qaimi creed, the IQQ. In contrast with previous research, I established that the IQQ as preserved in Ibn al-Jawzi's Muntaẓam was not the Qadiri creed. This was a different text, a subsequent text that was authored by anonymous authors at the request of the Caliph al-Qaim bi-llāh, al-Qadir's son and successor. While the Qadiri creed led to an escalation in conflict in the relationships between Sunnism and Shi'ism, things that I did not discuss here, the IQQ version was meant to reconcile between different wings within the Sunni community, namely the Hanbalis and the Ash'aris. The conflict between Abu Ya'la and the Hanbalis engendered a hybrid text which is partly Hanbali, partly Ash'ari. Abu Ya'la was forced to sign this text in a ceremony which was meant to restore the status quo between the Hanbalis and the Ash'aris. Indeed, the surviving version of the IQQ presents elements of the Ash'ari figurative reading of the divine attributes with a silent acceptance of the anthropomorphic expressions in the Quran. This acceptance was shared by both the Ash'aris and the Hanbalis. My observation that the IQQ was had a clear Ash'ari tone negates the assumption of previous research. The IQQ was a pro-Hanbali, anti-Ash'ari document. The content of the IQQ was, however, immaterial. The Hanbalis, at least during the lifetime of the Sharif Abu Ja'far, embraced this text and iconized it. The Asharis were not impressed by the Ashari slant of the text and ignored it, but in the long run, the IQQ became part of the ultra-traditionalistic bloodstream, as both Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah adopted the term Sifa Haqiqiyya as part of their theology. Thank you.
I can see. Where is? I want to thank Livnat, but I cannot see her.
I'm here.
Okay. Is your camera off?
No.
Or is just my okay. I don't know why. Okay, now I can see you, so I apologize. Cool. Thank you very much. Well, it was really impressive indeed, and very interesting. I will open the floor for questions in a minute, but as we always do, unless I forget, I'd like to advertise the next Majlis before I put it here, and it will be the start of a series on Khalil Abadimna. We will have a mini series on Khalil Abadimna within the Majlis series, and the first one the first speaker will be Beatrice Grundler. So I think we will remain on a very high note from today to next week. And well, thank you very much again. I will stop the recording and invite for questions.